Welcome back to the latest edition of The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Bruce Feldman, joined as always by my colleagues from The Athletic, Stuart Mandel and Ralph Russo. Ralph is with us now. He's going to go away in a little bit, not because he has anything better to do, but he actually does have to do something. So we'll see Ralph in a little bit, but we have a big show today. We got your mailbag questions. We got our breakout players in the games to watch. And because the big story this weekend was Penn State buying out James Franklin, we thought it would be a good idea to have on a real-life athletic director at a big program. Greg Byrne from Alabama is going to join us, where we can throw all sorts of questions at him about what's real and what's not when it comes to all the economics that go on with college football. All right, Stu, we're pleased to be joined by our guest. He is Greg Byrne, the Alabama athletic director, been an AD at the Power 4 level for almost 20 years. First at Mississippi State in the SEC, then Arizona, and now obviously in Tuscaloosa. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
You betcha. Thanks for having me. Good to see y'all.
You too. Okay, so over the weekend, obviously the huge story in college football was Penn State fired James Franklin. And to do that, they will owe him close to $50 million in terms of the buyout. And that prompted Stu to write a column Sunday on it, and had a paragraph that he wrote this, quote, "These schools aren't broke. They're just wildly irresponsible spenders," end quote. You've been an AD for a long time, worked in college athletics for even longer. What are the fans and us in the media missing here?
Well, it's complicated, right? We have a very challenging model. We have two sports that turn a profit: football and men's basketball. Football turns the healthiest profit by far, and then we have 19 sports that don't. And we fund and support all 21 of our sports at Alabama and many other institutions at a level that we're proud of, to develop the young people in the program. And football is the engine that pulls that train to allow everything else to happen. And so what institutions have to weigh, and each institution is different. I certainly can't speak on behalf of Penn State, is at some point, as you try to continue to move your department forward, you have to make challenging financial decisions. But by no means are schools just having, $50 million or $20 million or whatever it is, just burning a hole in your pocket saying, "Oh man, it's no problem. I can handle this buyout." That if you're going to make investments of that size, no matter who you are or where you are, that is a decision that, takes a lot of challenging discussion and a lot of planning. And at the same time, there are some schools that just don't have that ability to do that. And so what happens is, when you see an extreme, people will say, "Well, that's just the way it is. That's what people are willing to do." And while there certainly have been buyouts in college sports for sure, without taking a scientific poll of my peers, 100% of them would say, I would like to try to avoid that if at all possible.
I'm curious, Greg, kind of how we got here as the industry. I mean, obviously, coaches' salaries have always gone continually up and up and up. That predates any of us probably. But I don't feel like the guaranteed money, fully guaranteed money, 95%, 90%, whatever it is in these contracts, that feels like a more recent development. With 2021 being kind of a flashpoint moment where a lot of these contracts were made, and maybe I'm sure it goes back a little bit further than that. Certainly Jimbo's first contract at A&M, like when you have to hire a coach and you're doing those negotiations, how is there any avoiding it? Like, how did we get to a point where it's just assumed the coach gets a huge buyout?
Yeah, it's all about what waters you're going to fish out of, right? When Coach Saban retired, and something that we had planned for years, hoping we wouldn't have to execute on it, right? But we wanted to be prepared when that time came. We knew there was going to be a financial component potentially on who we hired. If you say, "Man, I'm not going to pay a buyout, I'm going to give a small contract as far as years and what's guaranteed," we wouldn't have hired Kalen DeBoer. right? And obviously for our program, what it means to our entire athletic department, our university, our state, college football as a whole, that was a program we were going to invest in. When I was the AD at Mississippi State, and I was 36 years old, I hired a young 35-year-old named Dan Mullen, and he was Urban's offensive coordinator at Florida. The finances were very different on that first contract. Now, as Dan had success and he became even more marketable, Mississippi State had to decide, what are we willing to invest to make sure that he stays here? Agents do a really good job of trying to create pressure on that market. It's one of their skills. And part of what you're going through that when you have those decisions to make is say, okay, this is something we're willing to do and invest in, or, well, we're at a certain school and we're going to continue to identify up and coming coaches that we think may get hired away by somebody else. And some schools take that path. Here at Alabama, we want to have stability in our head coaching position. And so we're going to invest in that at a very high level because of the impact that has on everything else. And each institution has to do what they think is best. So, Stu, I don't know. Those guaranteed contracts have been around for quite a long time, really my career, or a high percentage of it. What's changed is the dollar figure in there. And that's and coupled that with probably the patience level going down even further in the time as well.
Greg, let me ask you a question on this. So obviously, Nick Saban, I think we all agree, greatest college football coach in the history of the sport. To move forward that, and I know the word I'm about to use isn't a great word, especially, to say to an AD, but I feel like when you are doing a search to try and replace Nick Saban, there's got to be an element of desperation. Meaning, I know you had given yourself a crazy fast timeline. I want to say it was 48 hours or maybe it was 72. I don't remember
I asked the team for 72 hours before anybody got on the transfer portal.
72 hours. So you got to work fast. There are very few coaches, I would say, in college football who you could even fathom to go, oh yeah, this person would be up to jumping into the Nick Saban's office and they're not being dramatically big drop off. Kirby Smart would have been an obvious option, but he's not an option because he's at Georgia and that's his alma mater, obviously, right? So you have this component where you're talking about fishing in a small pool. You're like fishing in a shot glass, basically, right? There's just not a lot of people that are qualified, capable, you could name it, right? So, and then the other thing that's working against you is Jimmy Sexton, Nick Saban's agent, not so coincidentally, Kalen DeBoer's agent. And so you have very few agents who represent coaches, who represent most of the coaches. And so they know, not only do they know what the marketplace is, in some ways they're driving the marketplace with what's real, what's not real. There's all sorts of rumor mongering that goes on, whether they're intentionally doing it or whether they're benefiting from it. It's putting you as an AD in a big disadvantage. So let me ask you this part of it to get to this. Is that element of desperation of just, there's only so many guys I could hire and it's small, I have to reel this fish in no matter what. And that puts ADs in just almost an untenable situation.
Yeah, obviously for Alabama football, that's probably not be the head coach here at Alabama is not a learn on the job, first head coaching job situation normally. There are exceptions. I mean, Kirby's first head coaching job was at Georgia, and he has done a really good job there, obviously. But no, I mean, you have, in the case when Coach Saban retired, you have the transfer portal, you have NIL pretty much unregulated, and which is very challenging. I know there's a thought process that, well, they got the money, and that's such a overused, easy narrative that's just simply not true. We all have a fiduciary responsibility to our departments, and so. Yeah, when knowing that, hey, that your pool of candidates is very small, and quite frankly, Kalen DeBoer was somebody I had researched extensively beforehand. If the time ever did come for Coach Saban, where he did retire, because I think he was one that we had a chance to get, would fit well here at our university and in our culture, and is a really good football coach, and gave us a chance to continue to compete at the levels that we expect to here at Alabama. There weren't a lot of proven commodities out there with that, and so we were very fortunate to be able to hire him when we did, and so obviously we were going to come aggressively to make that happen, and we did. And so I looked at it not desperation. I looked at it as, let's do what's right for our program.
Greg, I wanted to ask you, so, Stu and I both genuinely like Kalen DeBoer. I feel like anybody who's ever been around him has an appreciation for him. Did an amazing job everywhere he's been. You hire him last year, and he beats Georgia, and then you lose to Vandy, give up 40 points, and then the end of the year happens and lose to a not a great Michigan team, and I think there's a lot of mounting pressure. Start out the season at Florida State, it does not go well. I wanted to ask you, as an AD and as somebody who's been in this for a long time. So right now at Michigan State, I'm not going to have you comment on Michigan State, but like Jonathan Smith, really good coach, goes in there, has like a year that's not really on 5-7, which is kind of where that program has been the last couple of years. Gets off to a bad start this year. Now everybody wants him seemingly fired, within year two. Given the expectations of fans and honestly media of what Alabama has been at a ridiculously high level, after that first game against Florida State, and it wasn't just fans who were saying, I feel like it was a lot of people in the national media as well. What is the echo chamber like in your chair when you think you have the guy, but he's never coached in the SEC and nobody's ever replaced Nick Saban, and you're seeing all this, and how is that landing with you? Coming off of, we're going to lose this game against Florida State, and then the aftermath of it, much less knowing what Feinbaum's going to say 18 hours later.
How do you handle that, right? You block out the noise. Yeah, so do I have enough time to tell a story?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I was in 7th grade. My dad was the athletic director at Oregon. They didn't have two nickels to rub together. Phil Knight was building his little sneaker company called Nike back then, right? And so there was a letter to the editor, because back then we didn't have the internet. And if you wanted to get something off your chest, you got out your typewriter or your word processor and sent a letter off to in Eugene. It was the Eugene Register Guard. Great. It was a great paper, right? And so the letters would get published once a week. Well, somebody said my dad should get fired, and everybody will laugh at this. The reason why he should get fired is because the Oregon State football game wasn't on TV that year. Okay. I had all emotional maturity of how old are you there? 13-year-old. And we had just got a Apple computer, Apple II computer. And I'm at the keyboard typing away because I was paying attention to college athletics at that age. And my dad walks in and he says, "Son, what are you doing?" I said, I'm writing a letter to the editor after that guy wrote a letter to the editor saying you should be fired. He didn't understand that you don't control who gets selected for that. And back then, USC and UCLA would always get selected because there was only like one game on a week. And he said, "You want to be an athletics director, don't you?" And I said, "I do. Yes, I do." And he said, "Can't pay any attention to it." And so when we go win a national championship in football or have a great game, whatever it is, in whatever sport, and there's a lot of attention to it, you got to just keep your head down during that time. And not to say you're not going to enjoy it and celebrate, but when things aren't going well, but you have great belief in what you're doing as far as the department and who's leading your program. And I certainly, obviously, as you know, all you got to do is look at Kalen DeBoer's track record. And so, to be honest, I saw very little of it, almost nothing. And I have a Twitter account, but if you notice, not that you're paying attention to it, I don't tweet much anymore. Just block out the noise, and you just go back to work, and what can you do to get better? And when Nick Saban retired, and I worked with him longer than any AD ever worked with him, and still talk to him regularly. I feel so fortunate to have worked with him, continue to work with him. I love the man; he's great. And but if anybody thought that there would not be any speed bumps or potholes in the process, that would be completely unrealistic. And one of the many things I've admired about Kalen is his just ability to keep moving forward, control what he can control, and work on getting our team better. And that's what he's continued in the staff and the kids. And so, being inside the building like I am, I was just walked through the training room before I was up here, just talking to our kids and seeing them and walked through the coach's office, saw them. And it's a good culture. And it's one, will we win every single game we want to win? Nope. We'll lose one or two of them that maybe we shouldn't at some point. I'm not saying every year, but it's going to happen. But we're also win some games that we are going to win those games based off of the hard work and resiliency that we're showing. And that's what you got to look at long term.
Yeah. I mean, we hear, like, we're on Twitter all day or we're on Slack all day. And this is just such a knee-jerk reaction sport. I mean, we come on Sunday morning, the mornings after the game, right? And we're our opinion of Penn State switched, from one extreme to the other after they lost to UCLA. But, I will say, and Bruce can probably attest to this, like, when we come and visit your building, right? We go out into the world, I guess, and visit a college football building. One thing that always strikes me is, like, Paul Feinbaum's show is not blaring on the TVs. People are not hunched over Twitter. Like, it just seems like it's any other day, right? Whether it's March, whether it's the middle of the season, like, people like yourself, you're going to a meeting, right? You've got a 10 o'clock meeting schedule. It doesn't really seem to matter whether the football team won or lost the previous weekend. And so,
control what you can control, right, Stu?
I think people would like to know what it is like to be on the other side of a negotiation with Trace Armstrong or whoever it may be, because I think I think one area where maybe, and I'm not saying you specifically, but ADs might be in a tough spot is, like, that's what those guys do for a living. They negotiate for their clients. You guys have so many other things on your plate. It's not like how often, that Kalen DeBoer was the first time you've had to negotiate for a new football coach at Alabama in your time there, right? So is it testy? Is it, like, what's it like to be on the other end of those kind of negotiations?
It's business, right? You are direct. You know where the market is. You better be prepared going into it. If you go in there unprepared, man, it doesn't matter who it is, they'll eat you alive, because that's what they do. Because, Stu, you're right. I mean, right here, I got a picture of all 21 of our sports behind me. We have 638 young men and young women. We have 350 employees. Got a lot of fans. All those things. There's a lot. Who we are engaged with on a daily basis is very wide. From an agent standpoint, their focus is on contracts, marketing opportunities, and I'm sure there's other things I'm forgetting, but it's probably much more focused. So you better be prepared. You better know where the market is. You better know where you can go and can't go as an institution from a support from your president, your board, and go in and do your very best that you can to negotiate the contract when those times come. And so they have a job to do and you have a job to do, and you just go do it to the very best that you can.
And then if your coach is successful, you have to deal with every year him calling and saying, hey, he's getting interest over here. He's getting interest over here. Let's talk about a new contract, right?
I know not one of you have ever been called by an agent saying, hey, you should maybe put this guy's name out for the job because I think they're really interested in him. You don't need to comment on that. But, having been around it for a long time, and I'm getting more gray hair than the first time I met you two, and listen, sometimes it's very legit, right? And you guys are put in a tough position saying, okay, what is it? I don't want somebody else to beat me on the story. But I want to be accurate too, right? And, from a journalistic integrity standpoint. And so you do your very best to hopefully have a relationship with your coaches that you can go have honest dialogue with them and say, hey, this is where we are. This is what we want to do. Let's talk through these things, and let's not do it through publicly. Let's do it between us. And agents will be involved in that process too. And hopefully you have, best thing you can do is have a track record as an AD that, hey, if you say you're going to do something, you back it up. And they know that if you're telling them something, that it's the truth. So that helps you navigate those very challenging waters. And lastly, I'd much rather have a coach that is getting mentioned for other jobs because of the job they're doing than having a coach saying, man, how are you going to get rid of this person? And that's not the position we want to be. That goes to the buyouts, which is what you wanted to talk about originally.
Yeah, no, it's when I was 23 starting out in this, I was so naive that when I feel like Ohio State firing John Cooper was one of the first big ones for me. And all of a sudden, like in the papers the next day, everybody had the list of candidates. And this is how naive I was. I was like, how did they get that so fast? Why did the AD tell them who he was looking at? That's crazy. As it turns out, that is not how those lists come together.
Now you know how the sausage is made there, right?
Yeah. Well, Greg, we really appreciate your time today. Obviously, it's right smack dab in the middle of the football season.
Well, we have every game we've had this year. We've played somebody that was undefeated, and I do want to take this, since I've got the two of you and you both are good, strong voices in the college sports and college football world. I want you to know we have been very purposeful in making very good non-conference strength of schedule games. I think it's good for our team. They love playing in those games. I think it's good for our fans. They love going to those games. It's good for college football. It's good for our friends over at Fox, right? And it's good for our friends at ESPN and ABC and every place else. But I also was really frustrated last year. And listen, we lost a couple of games we shouldn't have lost. But Oklahoma and Vanderbilt were good teams too. They both. Oklahoma was down from what they've been, but Oklahoma's obviously a storied program. Vanderbilt's had a lot of success lately. And what I want to see, and I got frustrated last year because all I read was 2 versus 3 losses in the postseason. And I've said this to my friends at Fox. I've said this to my friends at ESPN. We better want to make sure we continue to incentivize good college football games. 9 games in the SEC now. That'll be a bear, right? We're still gonna play one Power 4 non-conference game every year, and I think that's good for college football. And most of the other leagues are doing that. I think one is not. And I think it's important that gets recognized when it comes time to talk about postseason and what's ahead, because that's not just for Alabama. That's good for college football as a whole, and it's good for the enterprise of it. So I hope we continue to stay focused on that. And the last thing is, as we're navigating these waters that's been pretty much unregulated the last few years, there's, I've been to DC with Coach Saban several times over the last few years, walked the halls of Congress. Never thought I would do that in the manner that I did and have done, and probably will do it in the future. The SCORE Act is something we need to have passed to give us some guardrails for the long-term health of college sports. 31 of the 32 commissioners of the conference commissioners have supported it. The Student Athletic Advisory Committees have supported it. The NCAA has supported it. And nothing works long-term without regulation. And I can tell you these very choppy times, even the most resource institutions are really struggling trying to figure this thing out. And that's not a play on words or anything like that. It's people that really genuinely care about wanting to have broad-based programming and support what we're doing in college athletics and the Olympic movement and education and everything else. So thank you for letting me have the opportunity to express some of those things. Hopefully it doesn't.
Those are two pretty deep. Do you have another half hour? Those are two pretty big topics in college sports.
Happy to talk about them anytime you want.
We'll spare the 9-3 versus. We got plenty of time for that. I'm sure you're hoping that you don't have that problem this year. That you'll be comfortably in. The SCORE Act, I could go on and on and on about, but it has been. I would just say it's been, and this was in my column, right? Like it's been an interesting juxtaposition watching games on Saturdays, where you see. The games are awesome, right? They're extremely entertaining. NIL, portal, none of that has had a negative effect. I would think you would agree. Has not had a negative effect on the field product, right? So the juxtaposition from maybe you were going to say it has.
Well, I will tell you that we have gotten feedback from the scouts, general managers, and the NFL. Coach Saban, I've talked some about this. Is that there is been. I'm trying to just say my words carefully here. At times, there has been there's been noticed kind of resiliency, at the NFL level at times. I can't put names to it. All right. So I'm talking in general.
But you would say the product doesn't quite look as good to somebody who looks at the art on the wall, right?
Yeah, that's a fair way to say it, Bruce. And
the skill development is being affected.
Yeah. So I know the three of us, when we were 18 to 22, we made great decisions every day, didn't we?
I don't even think we make them now. And we all have a bunch of gray hair. So yes, duly noted.
So my point in all that is part of what happens in those years in college is, and listen, I've changed jobs. So I realize there's some hypocrisy with what I'm saying. Okay. At the same time, too, I did learn some things about resiliency when I was that age that helps me today at this age. Right. And even this morning, I get up early every morning. All right. And when my alarm clock goes off at 5:15, I want to hit the snooze button. And I say to myself, don't be lazy. Get yourself up out of bed, go do something productive at that time. And I'm tempted to hit the snooze button or turn my alarm off and sleep another hour and I'd still be fine, right? And so I do think just having the ability, from an educational standpoint, to have kids, and we've got some, to be on their third, fourth, and fifth school, that's not good. We've had kids. We had a young man in a sport outside of football this year that transferred in here, and he transferred in as a finance major with good grades. Right? Some of his credits don't transfer here, and that's not an Alabama thing. That's everywhere where credits are different. Is that young man better off long term from having a degree in finance? Yeah, I would say he was. And so while the TV ratings are strong, attendance is still really good. College football is so special. I mean, look at you go to a game even in a small school or a big school, and it's such an incredible environment. And you don't want to lose that. And at the same time, too, I do think there is it's different, and we have to accept that. So I don't know if you can just paint it with a broad brush and just say there's no, everything's even better than where it was. The other part is I'm on the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, College Advisory Committee. I think there's like 6 or 8 ADs in the country that are on this thing. And the reason why they formed it is they're worried to death about the Olympic movement going forward because we fund it. And the thing, and Stu, when I say this, it's not me trying to, or Bruce either, trying to go after you guys. When I read all the columns about NIL, when I read all the columns about the popularity, nothing is missed. You know what nobody ever talks about? The picture right behind me. And that we have such a challenging model because we have one sport that turns a healthy profit at our level. And then we have one that turns a profit in men's basketball, and we have 19 that don't. And I'm talking more directly to our coaches and our student athletes about the finances of college athletics than I ever wanted to, or because of the reality of what we're facing. At one point in my career, wasn't at Alabama, but I had a tennis student athlete that came in and said, man, I really got the short end of the stick. I should have been getting paid here. And I said, we don't charge for tickets. We generated no revenue in your program. He said, no, we do because I know the television contracts, and I know that our tennis team was on TV this year, so we helped generate revenue. I said, that was an add-in. It was just, I'm glad we did it. That's good exposure for your team, for your family to be able to watch you. But there's just this misconception of what the realities are from an economic standpoint. And so I do think because of the world that we're in right now, it is really important that we're more transparent with the people in our buildings, including our student athletes, about how all this happens. And I probably have offended somebody in that process, and I'm trying not to. And I also make sure that they know we care about you. We care about your sport. You're valuable. But at the same time, too, one of my other sayings is today's gift is tomorrow's expectation. As soon as we do something for a young man or a young woman and their team and their coach and everything like that, that's what the new normal is, right? Even when you tell them, hey, this may be a one-time deal. And so trying to balance all those things with a very complicated model I'm not the smartest fellow in the world by any stretch, but it's not as easy as probably what sometimes is portrayed.
And I think that brings us back full circle to how this whole interview started and why there's probably a disconnect, right? Because I think all those challenges are real. It's to fund all those sports that you have. But then when Penn State goes and spends $50 million to fire its coach, the school, like we see the ads on TV during the games, right? Call your congressman. Women's sports and Olympic sports are in danger, right? Danger of being cut. But then when Penn State spends $50 million, fires football coach, people say, see, apparently they do have the money, right? That money, that's $50 million they could be spending on the gymnastics team and the tennis team and whatnot, right? It's all about where you choose to invest the money. And because football drives all the money, I think that's just been the default, right? Like we spend as much as we possibly can on football, even if that means having to pay a huge buyout for the coach to go away. So I think that's where, and we don't have to keep, going into a deep philosophical thing about this, but that's where you see that disconnect of, they're saying that it's really hard to fund the athletic department, but then it just seems like whenever a coach gets fired or a coach is threatening to leave, they always find the money, right? That $50 million was sitting there somewhere. I think that's why you guys are in this position right now of kind of having like a real existential thing going on, and people like me writing, no, it's not.
Mm-hmm. It's challenging. You're absolutely right, and I can understand the angle on that very much. And I also say that there are outliers, and where you see an example of something like that. And I'm not criticizing Penn State. That's their decision. We all have to make our best decisions that we can for our institutions. But I also don't think. I also think there's some context that comes along with that. That it's an oversimplification to say, oh, they have the money, right? And it's that is a challenging thing to manage with what Penn State's going through right now. And I know I certainly have confidence that they're doing what they think is best for their institution. And at the same time, too, we're all making a lot of decisions on an annual basis to try to make sure we're supporting our programs across the board in a way that allows the young men and young women to develop at the best of their abilities.
All right. We've kept you way too long. Thanks, Greg.
Okay. All right. Y'all take care.
All right. We thank Greg Byrne for joining us today on The Audible. We're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we will answer your mailbag questions as well as give you the breakout players to keep an eye on in this weekend's games.
All right, guys, let's talk breakout players to watch in this weekend's big games. Hopefully ones you're not as familiar with, which is why I'm having trouble finding anybody from the big games because there's a lot of recognizable players there. I'm going to go, it's Duke, Georgia Tech this week. Big game in the ACC race because those teams are tied for first right now at 3-0 in the ACC. Duke lost a couple games early in the season, and then, lo and behold, freshman running back Nate Shepard broke out. He, over the last two games against Syracuse and against Cal, he had a 49-yard run. He had a 46-yard run. He ran for 168 yards against Syracuse and 91 yards against Cal. And so that offense is now more balanced. It's not just Darian Mensah chucking it downfield. I think Duke is going to beat Georgia Tech this week and get, squarely into the race there in the ACC. What about you, Bruce?
I am going to go with a player in a game that you're going to be at this weekend. Friday night, you're going to be in Berkeley to see Bill Belichick's North Carolina team.
Can you believe that's my first college football game of the season, of all games, Miami Cal? UNC Cal.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see. I think we'll all be fascinated to see what happens after a bye week. Is North Carolina much improved from the last time we saw them? But their offense has really struggled, no way around it. And they're going to play a Cal team with a couple of playmakers on defense. And Liberty transfer TJ Bush is a big linebacker, 6'3", 265, very disruptive. He could be a big problem for the Tar Heels if they still have some issues up front.
All right, I get to talk on the podcast for the first time. That's fun. I am going to go with, though I heard the interview went very well with Greg Byrne. I'm going to go with the Holy War, a player from the Holy War. We all love Utah and BYU, even when it's not a conference game, even when it's not a matchup of ranked teams as it is this time. So it's always an interesting game. And this year, it's also a very big game. John Henry Daly is the edge rusher there for Utah, leads the Big 12 in sacks with about 6.5. Interesting transfer from BYU kind of a reserve last year, has become a prominent player on the defense this year. He also a little bit of like a Nate Orchard vibe going on, if for Utah fans there, like slightly undersized pass rusher, edge rusher, very disruptive. Should be a great game in Provo this weekend. A lot riding on it, and keep an eye on John Henry Daly, the sack master for the Utes.
Can I just say, I've said it before in various outlets or whatever, or forums, but the Holy War is the most underrated rivalry in the country. It is an absolutely nasty rivalry. Those fan bases hate each other, and crazy things always happen in that game. And last year, of course, it was, BYU looks like the game's over. They get second life on a defensive holding call, and they drive down to win the game, after which Utah AD Mark Harlan goes into the press conference and just tears into the officiating. Stuff like that seems to happen because they have just the emotions are just run so high in that game. So I hope people check it out this weekend.
Yeah, but the coaches actually love each other there, because you have Kalani Sitake and Kyle Whittingham work together, and quite honestly, everybody loves Kalani. So, and by the way, one last plug, Chris Kamrani, our colleague, has a very good story that will be out before the game this weekend on Sitake. Check it out. We're going to take another quick break, and then we are going to answer your mailbag questions. All right, it's time for the mailbag. As always, send your questions to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. Make them concise, make them creative, and you could win the $12 Trader Joe's gift card. We're going to start with Brandon about Texas Tech. Hey guys, I enjoyed your discussion about James Franklin and other coaching vacancies, but I think there's a bigger story here. The most impactful change this year is the massive infusion of NIL money at Texas Tech. If your goal is to win a national title, why not start with having the most money to pay the players? Joey McGuire is a good coach, but it's clear the NIL investment is what's turned Texas Tech into a top 10 team. So before AD signed these contracts with the massive buyouts, might they consider hiring a solid coach on a reasonable deal and then build the best roster money can buy? What are your thoughts there, Ralph?
Okay, so a couple quick things. First of all, yes, I think coaches' salaries are inflated. They are inflated in part because for years there was a lot of money in the system that had to be spent not on players, but on coaches. So that's sort of how we got here to where the market for coaches is what it is, because they weren't paying players. I do not necessarily think that the market for coaches will come down now, unfortunately, maybe plateau a little, but I don't think it's going to necessarily come down. I do agree with the point. However, the problem is, let's say Joey, I guess Joey McGuire, his team looks pretty good to make the playoff. But then I wonder if you're a Texas Tech fan and maybe let's say you make the playoff. Oh, God forbid you don't make the playoff, but you make the playoff, but you don't win a game, right? Then where your head's going to go is, oh, we don't have a good enough coach. We got to improve at coach. This guy's not good enough. Let's go.
Isn't that basically what happened to James Franklin?
To a certain degree, yes. Yeah. I mean, to a certain degree, that's always it. Like
the roster, and he blew it.
Yeah, right. So that's the thing that I think will keep schools from necessarily saying, hey, just pour money into players, because at a certain point, that isn't good enough and you blame the coach. So then you have to go spend $10 million on a coach because the coach you had wasn't necessarily good enough, or at least he is perceived to be not good enough. Because that's part of this too. It's a little bit of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like, I need to have a $10 million coach because they have a $10 million coach. And if our program is as good as their program, then we have to have a $10 million coach too. So I think your logic is right. I think it was Brandon who asked that question. Your logic is right, but none of this is particularly logical.
Right. Also, Texas Tech is a pretty big outlier. Not everybody has a Cody Campbell just sitting there waiting to spend $55 million on athletes.
Sorry, guys. Let's sneeze. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold here, but let's go to the next question, and I will throw it. Probably throw it back to you because this is one of your favorite topics, too. Love the show as always. Thank you very much. Nicole Davidson. This is from Nicole Davidson. You may not be able to address this because obviously you both work for The Athletic. Well, all three of us work for The Athletic. But if you can, I'm genuinely curious how much the media should reevaluate the situation with Arch Manning and take a little blame for the overhype to now tear him apart. He's clearly had a challenging start, but would anyone care to this extent if the preseason hype hadn't gotten this out of control? And what point does some ownership need to take place on how much we are hyping 19 to 21-year-old kids before they ever play real games? This article seemed way extreme for a kid with his first real starting job. Talking about an article on The Athletic that essentially called Arch Manning a flop.
Yeah.
Right? Probably a little quick to do that. None of us wrote it.
No.
None of us wrote it here. Our colleague Will Leach wrote it. But nonetheless, it certainly turned a lot of attention on us to a certain degree. What do you think,
Yeah,
Stu?
I mean, the hype, if you want to call it overhyping of Arch, began long before this season. It began when he was in high school. And I don't know that, frankly, it was avoidable, right? He is one of a kind. He is Peyton Manning's and Eli Manning's nephew. And he's playing quarterback. And he's a 5-star recruit. Where did you think this was going to go? Right now, you could say, well, maybe that train should have interrupted itself at some point when he wasn't playing, when he hadn't proven himself. But two things I would just say. First of all, the media writes about what people are reading. And every little thing we wrote about Arch was blowing up. Like, there was clearly a lot of interest in him, regardless of what he had or hadn't proven on the field. And then for me, the key moment was, I have a lot of respect for the people who do NFL draft evaluations. And they're saying, even after only 2 starts, he's going to be the number 1 pick in the 2026 draft. And, in theory, you would think they're going to be less likely to be caught up in the last name and the hype than maybe me or you. Maybe that wasn't the case. I don't know. But basically, it was a chain of events starting when he's in high school. So then he picks Texas, becomes a big deal. He's a backup. Should they play him? Should he start over Quinn Ewers? And then number 1. And so all those things combined for just the perfect storm of, this is going to be the most overhyped player in the country, and he's going to have a hard time living up to those expectations. And then when the first few games went so badly, well, guess what? Here comes the backlash.
I think maybe another way, criticism of that particular column, and I would, kind of go back to you on this, Stu, because I know you wrote a pretty damning column of Arch after the opener at Ohio State, is this. Do you think it is right to write off or make a determination that a quarterback in his first month of playing the position, as it's like his team at Texas, never mind new offensive line, not a lot of pieces around him that are experienced, and basically determine that he's a flop after 1 month?
I would not use the word flop or bust or anything like that. But I think when I wrote about it, I said, look, he's not the guy. He is not the number 1 pick, ready-made NFL quarterback that he was, pumped up to be. Let's pump the brakes. I thought, and I don't remember which one, but one of our NFL writers after the Florida game said, hey, it's just time to reset expectations. Stop thinking about him as a 2026 prospect at all, right? Assume it's going to be 2027 at the earliest. And then you can kind of follow it in a more reasonable trajectory. He made big strides against Oklahoma. Good for him, right? Maybe that keeps continuing over the rest of this year and next year. And you can have a more reasoned conversation about it, right? But it became clear to me, even after the Ohio State game, but certainly later, hey, pump the brakes on this guy's generational talent, and he's going to be the number 1 pick in the spring, and that we're not seeing that. Let's get over that. And I think that's a fair criticism. And we've talked about it before, guys. In the past, you would avoid criticizing a college athlete. Then NIL happened and whatnot. And I still am not all athletes are fair game. But yeah, when the guy's showing up in ads throughout the game that you're watching, I think at that point, it's kind of, there's no point pretending this is a 1993 style college quarterback.
Can I just say real quick, I've always felt weird about the idea that you get paid a lot, so I get to be nasty to you? And I know you were not nasty. You just wrote a fair column, but there's a weird thing that happens in sports where it's like, that guy gets paid a lot of money, so I'm allowed to trash him. Like, what does that even mean? Like, just have a reasonable analysis here. But like, just because a guy gets paid a lot doesn't mean like you should be, that they're fair game. Well, it's just a weird dynamic we have in sports.
That happened vividly with James Franklin, where like it was like I said to somebody today, like that video where the people are on both both sides of the tunnel, just booing the crap out of him to his face is like, guys, he's a human being. Yeah. I know you want him gone. I know he just had a bad loss, but like, his family's right in front of him. Like he's a human being, let's not like stomp on him just because he makes a lot of money. The last question is from Jonathan Silverman, not the actor, he says. We've had one from him before. I remember him saying that exact same thing. What makes a great coach? Hi, first, I love the new theme song. It's very college football-y. Good to hear that because previously we heard a lot of people saying, bring the old one back. When I listen to the podcast, I often hear you all say he's a great coach. And I guess I want to know what you mean when you say that. Bruce, is there any deeper explanation other than he's a great coach because he wins a lot?
One of the bigger pet peeves I have with Stu is that he is very flippant using the word great. I know we've talked about this a little on the podcast over the years of my old colleague, Jim Trotter, once gave me a good lecture about great you do not throw around a lot. You should save it for very rare occasions. And this is one of those instances where I would circle back to that. I mean, I try not to use the word great to describe a lot of football coaches because quite honestly, the aforementioned James Franklin was a great coach at Vanderbilt, right? He did an amazing job there. Certain times guys are really good coaches at one place and then they go to another school and it's not a great fit or their circumstances aren't ideal and it doesn't quite work out that well. Nick Saban was a great college coach. I would say that. I don't know how many other coaches I would say were great college coaches or are great college coaches. To be quite honest, Stu and I have spent the last few years doing these top 25 coaching rankings, and it gets really hard after you get past like 2 or 3, right? And I think at one point, Stu, because we looked back at this a couple of weeks ago about Sark, I think I had him 4 and Stu had him 3, and we probably would reconsider that at this point because it's such a fluid process and everything else. So I would say there's very few guys I would consider great, but great to me is somebody who could win big wherever they go, and they do. And that's just not a lot of guys. That's just not. I mean, because I think when you look at whether it's Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley, they took over really good situations and they won big. To Ryan Day's credit, he's still been there. He had adversity. He faced it, still facing it to some degree, and he won a national title. Lincoln Riley left a situation at Oklahoma and has not been great at USC. At times he's been very good. At times he hasn't been very good. And I just feel like to say somebody's a great coach, I think it has to have a level of consistency, and it can't be like 1 or 2 years. It has to be something that gets tested a lot and they constantly overcome it. Otherwise, you're a really good coach or a good coach.
I do think there's a lot of good coaches around. And if you hear me say great, probably am being too flip at that. But I do think there's a lot of really good coaches around who can be very good depending on the situation. But generally speaking, if you win, you're a good coach.
Curt Cignetti is a great coach. I'm going to go ahead and say that, not yet knowing how the rest of the season is going to play out. All right, who's getting the TJ's $12 gift card here? I think all of these were pretty good questions, so we will go around the room, and I will start with Ralph.
I like the question that I answered, so I'll take that one. I like the Joey McGuire question. I think it's good. It's a good way to think about college football going forward.
Okay, so Brandon, you are in the lead for now. Bruce.
I'm going to go with Brandon as well. So Brandon's going to get the gift card. I'm not even giving you the chance to.
Nice. What's interesting about that, I concede, is that that one was going to be third on my pecking order. I was going to give it to Jonathan, and if not Jonathan, Nicole. So Brandon, it's a good thing those two guys were in your corner. You get the gift card. Send your mailing address to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. We will be back Sunday for our live reaction show. It goes live on YouTube, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. @Audible Show is the channel on YouTube. We will see you then.